Hi, sixth grade scientists. Today we are going to be taking notes about factors affecting climate. You will need your science folder, a pencil, a new piece of notebook paper to add to your folder, and a highlighter if you have one. As you watch the video, please pause and write down all important information as we go. Go ahead and pause now if you need to go get your supplies. In your folder, turn to your table of contents. Add today's date. The topic is factors affecting climate, and the page number will be whatever next available page you have in your folder. At this time, please pause the video to update your table of contents. Now, turn in your folder to the page that you designated to take notes today, and at the top of that piece of notebook paper, title it Factors Affecting Climate. We will be taking notes today on factors that affect climate. Pause the video now if you still need to finish writing the title. Before we can talk about factors that affect climate, we need to first identify what climate is. The terms climate and weather can often be confused outside of the scientific world. So it will be important for us to know the difference between those two terms, climate and weather. The first term I'd like you to write down on your note page is climate. If you have your highlighter, go ahead and highlight that term as well as you write it down. And then you can highlight all of the vocab terms that we use today. So go ahead and define climate as the general weather of a specific area over a long period of time. This includes seasons. Pause the video now to write down this definition of climate. The next thing we need to identify is a formal definition of weather. We experience weather daily, but it will be important for us to have a universal definition of weather. So when we're speaking about weather in class, we know what we're talking about. Okay, so weather is defined as the conditions of the atmosphere at a particular time and place. Weather can change quickly. You guys have experienced that yourself. Go ahead and pause the video now to write down the definition of weather in your notes. Now that we have defined climate and weather, we are going to be able to tell the difference of the two. So let's take a look at the factors that affect climate because that's what this note-taking session is about. The first factor that affects climate is latitude. So go ahead and write factor 1 and then the term latitude. Latitude is defined as how far north or south a location is from the equator. The latitude lines are the lines going across the globe horizontally. Pause the video now to write down the definition for latitude. The closer you are to the equator, the warmer it is. The farther away you are, the colder it gets. This is very familiar for us as we know those locations near the equator have warmer weather and less variance in weather season to season. Take a look at the image on your screen now. As you can see, the blue arrows pointing to those locations further from the equator, more close to the poles. We also know that because of the tilt of the Earth, those latitudes away from the equator are receiving more indirect sunlight throughout the year. The second factor that affects climate is elevation. Elevation is defined as the distance of a place above sea level. Pause the video now to write down the definition. Have you ever wondered why the higher you travel up in the mountains, the colder it gets? Or ever noticed how typically when you see mountains, they are snow-capped? The reason is that the higher the elevation, the higher the altitude, which means the air is thinner, so there's less air pressure above you. As the air pressure decreases, the air molecules are able to spread out further, so they lose thermal energy. And then that makes the temperature decrease. Fun fact from this little image that you see on your screen, Mount Everest has the highest altitude in the world, meaning it is the highest point above sea level. So now that we've discussed the distance from the equator being our first factor and elevation being our second factor that affects climate, which is elevation, remember, the distance on land above sea level. Let's talk about the third factor that affects climate, which is distance from water. You may or may not have thought of this before, but we are going to have distance from water as a factor that affects climate because water temperatures and the air above the water rise and fall more slowly than land or air temps. Pause the video now to write down this factor that affects climate. The location's proximity to water can affect its climate. Oceans, lakes, swamps, those things can impact the land's climate around it. For example, in the summer, the cooler water sends a cool breeze to the neighboring land, cooling the land and providing a nice breeze. If you've ever been on the beach, you may have noticed a nice breeze. In cold states, the water is warmer than the land. So then, since the water is warmer than the land, there's a warmer breeze that is moving onto the land, which would warm the land. This may result in less snowfall than places inland, meaning away from the water. Living in close proximity to the water can cause sea breezes and land breezes. We'll be discussing those two types of winds later, but swamps and marshes have hot water, and so therefore swamps can cause nearby areas to be hot and humid. The fourth factor that can affect climate is ocean currents. Ocean currents ties in very well with our last factor of distance from water. Ocean currents impact climate because warm ocean currents spread warmer air over the land near that body of water, while cooler ocean currents spread cooler air over the nearby land. Pause the video now to record why ocean currents are a factor that affects climate. And you can see in the image the different ocean currents, the red arrows representing warm air, the warm water, and the blue representing cool water. The final factor that affects climate is global winds. Global winds are winds that blow steadily in a specific direction. Pause the video now to record this factor in your notes. We will talk extensively about global winds in our next unit, but we will be introduced to this concept in this unit. Global winds are going to impact the type of air mass that moves into a region, and global winds are predictable and occur in a seasonal pattern. That is why they are considered a factor that affects climate. So, to finish up your notes, at the bottom of your note sheet, please write down an explanation of the difference between climate and weather. Use information that you just learned to support your thinking and be ready to share your thoughts the next time we meet in class. Have a great day.